Welcome to the Plane Hoppers Guild.
Greetings, adventurers, explorers, treasure seekers, and sellswords. Welcome to the Plane Hoppers Guild. I am Dungeon Lord Jay.
And I'm Journeyman Eric. And welcome to our first ever very special episode. We're going to be going over some major factions of the Forgotten Realms and specifically the Sword Coast, and I am super excited to see this.
Yeah, this is our first ever episode dedicated to one topic wholly. So we're going to see how it goes.
I'm very excited because I think this is a great topic to go over. These factions are going to be really great information for new dungeon masters.
I will reiterate that we are going to be talking about the factions of the Forgotten Realms. And I guess in order to talk about factions, we have to ask ourselves, what is a faction? Specifically in terms of a TTRPG, a tabletop game. What I think of when I think of a faction is a group or organization that has its own identity, goals, and often unique beliefs. So political groups, religious organizations, criminal syndicates, or mystical orders. I have a couple of examples of factions in pop culture and media. Can you think of one, Eric? A faction from media?
Oh, I mean, absolutely tons. Any sort of the Game of Thrones-esque would be the first pick.
Absolutely, the houses of Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
I have that one as well. I have the Stark, the Lannisters, the Targaryens. Those are factions for sure. One that I have is the Galactic Empire from Star Wars and the Rebel Alliance from Star Wars. Both of which are like competing factions. But you could also go for like the Jedi Order or the Sith or the Mandalorians. Those are also from Star Wars and are factions. Lots of factions in Star Wars, come to find out.
Yeah, I guess even in real life instances, you might consider like the Freemasons a real world faction.
Yeah, for sure. Another one that actually fits perfectly to what my definition of a faction is would be like your Hogwarts house. Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, Slytherin each represent specific values or traits, which is basically what a faction is. My last set of examples is from Marvel, the MCU. We could have the Avengers, S.H.I.E.L.D., or Hydra are also factions.
Yeah, so any sort of common banner that you could realistically assume if someone is part of them, there are certain characteristics they would likely display.
Absolutely. So my next question, when we're trying to talk about what factions are and establishing what factions are, we also have to ask ourselves, why do we have factions in the sense of tabletop games? So one of the reasons that we have factions in tabletop games is for world building. Factions add complexity and immersiveness. Having some or even all of the PCs and or NPCs being part of a faction can make players feel like they are part of a bigger picture. Plus, the real world, as we just discussed, has factions in it. I mean, technically a political party could be a faction, if you think about it.
Yeah.
It's also a good place for conflict or tension. Factions inherently introduce conflict and tension into a story. Two competing factions may have opposing beliefs, such as we discussed before, the Empire and the Rebels from Star Wars. Or many factions may vie for power or influence, like Eric said in Game of Thrones. Factions are also a good source for plot hooks. They can be a resource for DMs to introduce plot points or major conflicts within a campaign. For example, Eric, have you ever played Fallout New Vegas?
Way more than you can ever believe. One of my favorite games.
Absolutely. So that is a prime example of how a game master could introduce plot points through factions, right? You go find Benny at the strip, right? And once you get to the strip, it reveals that the strip is in all kinds of turmoil, and there's a bunch of factions vying for control of it, and you find yourself able to choose which faction you wish to ally with to change the course of the Mojave.
And on a similar note, especially from a player perspective, having large overarching factions could also give the player something they can kind of work towards. They can do faction missions, they can up their standing with them, and they'll know, if I go to this place where this faction controls it, I'll be safe, or I'll be rewarded better.
Exactly. That's another reason, is like not just plot hooks, but quest hooks. Factions can serve as a source of quests and missions just to get some gold or to have something to do. Like, I know Skyrim has like an unending loop of quests that you can always do for certain factions, but specifically I know for sure that the Thieves Guild has an unending loop of quests that you can undertake for rewards.
Yeah, and it's much more satisfying to be kind of a part of something than simply doing a quest for the, a lord of a certain castle.
Exactly. So I feel like we've discussed what a faction is, and why we use them in our tabletop games. Let's go ahead and move on to the main topic, the meat of this episode, the factions of the Forgotten Realms. Specifically, there are 5 factions that are the major factions of the Forgotten Realms, specifically the Sword Coast, but the Forgotten Realms in general. But before I can talk about the first 2 factions, I want to discuss what a points of light setting is, for these first 2 factions. Are you aware, Eric, of what a points of light setting is?
No, first time I've ever heard of it.
So a points of light setting is a world building concept. Points of light mean that the world is largely unexplored or incredibly dangerous, and civilization exists in isolated pockets or points of light amid a vast, mysterious darkness. The points of light are often cities, villages, or strongholds where people have managed to establish some level of safety and stability. The darkness surrounding these points is typically uncharted wilderness, dangerous territories, or regions filled with monsters. This type of world building facilitates the need for heroes or adventurers who will be willing to venture out into the unknown darkness to protect the points of light or explore and conquer the darkness. Does that make sense?
Oh, that makes total sense.
So the world is vastly either unexplored or incredibly dangerous, and there's only small pockets of safety where that facilitates the job of an adventurer, right? Because in the D&D setting, adventurer is a career to protect, the villagers when the goblins attack, or, there's a monster in the woods that needs to be taken care of. That's what adventurers are for. And a points of light setting facilitates the need for adventurers. So I consider the Sword Coast and the Forgotten Realms sort of like a points of light setting, where there are major cities and the rest of the world is vastly dangerous or unexplored.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It would be a fairly boring game if all the roads were safe.
And you would have no need for adventurers.
Exactly.
So to start things off, I wanted to start with the Lord's Alliance faction. The Lord's Alliance faction. The Lord's Alliance as a whole is a political coalition uniting cities and towns across the realms. It was created for the sake of economic stability and mutual protection between influential political powers on the Sword Coast and North Faerûn. So think Waterdeep, Neverwinter, Baldur's Gate. These cities are each their own massive city-state with its own government. The Lord's Alliance acts as a sort of UN to establish a unified front against common enemies. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah, certainly. It's less of a total government and more, like you said, just like a United Nations.
Each of these cities has made an agreement, an alliance, to come to each other's aid in times of crisis, where they're facing a greater foe than one city can handle. But the main focus of the faction is maintaining order and protecting trade routes. So they serve as the law in untamed frontiers and protect civilization from monsters in the wild. So this is why I talked about a point of light setting. They are a faction that stays in the darkness, quote unquote. If this is a points of light setting, they hang out in the darkness and protect civilization. They protect the points of light.
Okay, so it would be not uncommon for like the sheriff of a town to be part of the Lord's Alliance.
Correct. Absolutely. A small village or something like Phandalin. Yeah, absolutely. So members of the faction are loyal to their respective city, but they serve the common goal of ensuring the safety and prosperity of quote unquote civilization in Faerûn. For each faction, I have keywords that describe the faction. And my keywords for the Lord's Alliance are lawful, militant, and political. Their symbol is that of a golden crown on a red field. And I also came up with a pop culture touchstone for each faction. Maybe not pop culture, but a touchstone for each faction. And in my mind's eye, I see the Lord's Alliance as kind of like cowboy rangers, right? Like that out in the old west, where there was there's the big iron on his hip, like they sort of maintain order on the frontier.
Yeah, frontier justice. That's
absolutely
what I had in mind too.
So examples, I've pulled a couple of examples, but I don't have an example for everyone because some of them don't have good examples, but the example that I came up with was Sildar Hallwinter from the Lost Mines of Phandelver is a member of the Lord's Alliance. So like you were just saying about how the mayor or the sheriff of a town could be a member of the Lord's Alliance. That is absolutely true, and they tried to make that happen in Lost Mines of Phandelver.
Okay, very interesting. Apologies if I missed this earlier. Would people consider the Lord's Alliance to be a good aligned faction or more neutral?
They are a lawful faction. So it just, I imagine people in these frontier towns, between major civilizations, appreciate what the Lord's Alliance do. And merchants that travel between large cities appreciate what the Lord's Alliance do. But I wouldn't necessarily call them super good. They're more like a neutral good, lawful good kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like lawful, neutral good.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So for each faction, I wanted to see if you could name a couple of classes, like player character classes, that you would think fit into the Lord's Alliance or for each faction. So what kind of class do you think would fit into the Lord's Alliance?
Oh, first, right off the bat would be fighter.
Mm-hmm.
A guardsman, a tradesman, a worker for hire sent to help guard caravans. Fighter for sure.
I have fighter as well as possibly a wizard. Depending on what kind of alignment your wizard is, and it's the same sort of worker, fighter for hire kind of thing, But I also have an Oath of Crown paladin, which usually just they fight for their oath regards like a city or a civilization. An Oath of Crown paladin, but also an order domain cleric could work.
Yeah, I was gonna say cleric would just for practicality. They're going out into the wilderness, they're going out to these small towns. I could see them being the ones that might bring in these healers into places that otherwise wouldn't have them. Yeah,
absolutely. So what about backgrounds? So player character backgrounds, what kind of backgrounds do you think would be in the Lord's Alliance?
Well, obvious choice is soldier.
Yep.
I would almost say possibly like a guild master.
Yep, I have that as well.
And maybe even street urchin,
Ooh.
as somebody who grew up in one of these towns, and they're using the Lord's Alliance, as a army to elevate themselves. They join to have a decent pay and, go on adventures or whatever.
Absolutely. The only other ones that I have is a knight or a noble.
Yeah.
For the same sort of reason, where they want to do better for their city. They're loyal to the city that they come from.
I can definitely see the upper echelons being part of the nobility.
So the Lord's Alliance protect civilization, right? That's their main goal. But as we move on to the next faction, they almost sort of oppose the Lords of Alliance, not directly. They all want the common good. But the next faction that I want to talk about, and another reason that I talked about points of light setting, is the Emerald Enclave. So the Emerald Enclave is another faction, and they are a widespread group comprised of druids, rangers, and other nature-focused individuals. Their primary goal is to protect natural areas from various threats, including deforestation, elemental forces, and magical imbalances, as well as defending sacred groves, protecting endangered animals, and preserving the natural balance.
Kind of like the park rangers of the Forgotten Realms.
Exactly. The Emerald Enclave is far-ranging and decentralized, so branches often operate in isolation from each other. But they also serve as a quote-unquote point of light, because they are found deep in the wilderness and can, if you come across the Emerald Enclave in a very dangerous area, they may be able to help you survive the dangers of the wild, or a place to restock.
Yeah, as a port in the storm, so to say.
Yes, exactly. They're not opposed to civilization, as I described before. They just strive to keep it balanced with the natural world. So they keep civilization and the wilderness from destroying each other.
Yeah, I think one of my druids was tangentially related to the Emerald Enclave, and his catchphrase was beauty and balance.
Absolutely. That's really good, Eric. They love nature, right? But they absolutely fucking hate things that are unnatural, like undead, and like dark magic corrupting a forest and stuff like that.
So they would really be opposed to like the Shadowfell and demons and stuff.
Yes. Yes, for sure. Very unnatural stuff. So the keywords that I have for the Emerald Enclave is nature, balance, and survival. The symbol of the Emerald Enclave is a stag's head on a green field. And for my pop culture touchstone, I put down Captain Planet.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, it really feels like a team that are dedicated to like stopping pollution and destroying the world and protecting the natural world. But I also have the Lorax, like Dr. Seuss's Lorax. He like loves the trees, so that's my other one.
I always kind of took them too as not specifically individualists, but they kind of like being able to be self-sufficient. Almost. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like I said, they operate independent of other branches of the organization. So self-sufficient. So examples that I have of the Emerald Enclave is Doric, the druid from the D&D movie, Honor Among Thieves.
Mm-hmm.
She's from the Emerald Enclave. There's like a whole thing where they're destroying the forest and she's like mad about it, but it's because she's a member of the Emerald Enclave. And Halcyon and the Emerald Grove from Baldur's Gate 3, they are part of the Emerald Enclave.
This might be, okay, spoilers for Baldur's Gate 3. Kaga, she's part of the Shadow Druids. Mm-hmm. So would the Shadow Druids be like a enemy of the Emerald Enclave?
Probably, yes. I would say so. So, for classes, Eric, what do you got?
Druid and Ranger, first of all.
For sure.
100%. I would also go Cleric.
Okay.
For sure.
Nature Cleric.
Nature Cleric, yeah. And then I would say Monk.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I could agree with that.
That would be a good one.
Maybe
Nature Totem Barbarian, too.
That was my other one. I think any Barbarian would work.
Yeah, but especially Nature Totem.
Yeah. Totem Barbarians is good. The other one I have is Oath of the Ancient Paladin.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
They have like woodsy, druidy spells and stuff, and an Archfey Warlock.
Yeah,
like naturey spells and stuff like that. So for backgrounds, what are you thinking?
Well, Hermit would be a big one. Maybe Folk Hero.
Yeah, I have that one too.
I can't think of any other backgrounds that really fit the nature-y vibe.
There's one. Outlander.
Damn it. Yeah, Outlander for sure.
Outlander, and then the other one I have is Sage.
Yeah, I can see that.
You could make it work, yeah. But definitely Outlander, Hermit, and Folk Hero are the top of my list for sure. So that's the Lords of Alliance and the Emerald Enclave as factions. Now we are going to move on to faction number 3. And this faction stands alone because, like I just said, the Lords Alliance and the Emerald Enclave are kind of like two sides of the same coin. And the next two after the third one, the fourth and the fifth faction, are also two sides of the same coin. But the Order of the Gauntlet stands on its own. And it's, the Order of the Gauntlet. And in the lore, the Order of the Gauntlet is actually relatively new faction. Some of these other factions are ancient, like the Emerald Enclave and the Harpers they've been around for eons. But the Order of the Gauntlet is relatively new. So the Order of the Gauntlet is a religious military order of morally upstanding warriors and acolytes who dedicate themselves to the pursuit of justice and the defense of the innocent. They have strong principles of honor and chivalry, and they stand firm against the forces of chaos and malevolence.
Oh my god, these have paladin written all over them.
All over them, Eric. So, the Order of the Gauntlet take solemn oaths to protect the realms from all forms of evil, employing a no-nonsense approach to maintain order and protect the innocent. They have a rigid hierarchy that is fairly militaristic. As far as the hierarchy is concerned, it's very like militarized. Their members are highly trained and disciplined, and they have a rigid code of conduct that emphasizes upholding the law, integrity, self-sacrifice for the greater good.
Interesting. I haven't had much experience with them. You know what this sounds like to me?
What's that?
The Brotherhood of Steel.
Oh my god. I didn't even put that as one of my examples, but you know what? That is a fucking really good one. It is like the Brotherhood of Steel. Kind of. Because the Brotherhood like protects like knowledge, but the way that they are formatted is very similar to the Brotherhood.
Yes.
Very, very similar. Because of their oaths, members are allowed to act out of their own authority to identify threats and destroy them before they can grow. Most members are dedicated to a deity of good or lawful alignment, commonly the Triad, which is Torm, Tyr, and Ilmater are the three. That's called the Triad. So they're usually like worship some sort of deity. They are also more likely to be willing to face more supernatural threats, such as fiends and undead. They just want to smite evil where it stands. They have no qualms with just killing something that is evil. They're very like gonna just murder something if it's evil, and they can act on their own authority. So they won't even get in trouble with the higher ups if they like said, "Oh yeah, I killed this dude who was committing a crime." Their higher ups will be like, "Oh, fucking fantastic, good job."
Yeah, I think it's a faction that could be written of a lot of ways.
Yes, and I've actually used it to great success in the sort of way that you're talking about, where I've used it where my brother's character was part of the Order of the Gauntlet, and his father was a member, and he was like missing in the jungle or something. And the faction went to the jungle to smite a bunch of undead because the jungle's infested with undead. So they've been just smiting undead. It wasn't looking too good for them because there was like disease ridden. They didn't have enough rations. It was muddy. Like they were starting to get sick and dying. So my brother character's father wanted to retreat back to the mainland. But another character, Commander Breakbone, was more zealotry, like obsessed with smiting evil. And he like disposed of my brother's character's father and didn't let anyone know. It was like, we're going to continue to fight evil because that's what we're here to do. And that's what we're going to do. So it could, like you were saying, it could be played both ways where they're a good guy, but they could also be not so good. They're too zealot. What's the word I'm thinking of where they're like way too into it, almost like a cult.
I know what you mean. I'll think of the word later.
Yeah, but they're just like way too devoted to this thing. Yeah. Fanatical. Thank you. Yes, it could be on the borderline of fanaticism with the way that they handle certain situations.
Yeah, which I like, because on the surface, it sounds like a very goody two shoes. I'm gonna go out and kill evil, and I'm gonna bring justice. But if you start peeling, getting into that onion, there's a lot of opportunity for some pretty interesting, morally gray events to happen with them.
Right, and the Order of the Gauntlet only think in black and white, good and evil. There is no gray. So it definitely could be a place of conflict where a morally gray party, which is almost always the case with D&D, there's never a fully good party. They're always doing a little bit of sketchy shit, could come into conflict with the Order of the Gauntlet. My keywords for the Order of the Gauntlet are honorable, vigilant, zealous, and justice. The symbol for the Order of the Gauntlet is a gauntleted fist holding the blade of a sword. The touchstones that I thought of, I didn't think of the Brotherhood of Steel, but that was very good. I have like not your classic knights in shining armor, like your round table Arthurian knights, but also Judge Dredd or like a Captain America.
Yeah, that kind of independent justice entity, for better or worse.
That's exactly right. For examples of people who are in the Order of the Gauntlet, I couldn't find any of note. There's none in Baldur's Gate. I haven't seen any other examples of it, but we got a pretty good idea of who they are. So what about classes?
Well, obviously Paladin. I mean,
Paladin!
Paladin bros. Again, clerics. Clerics are useful everywhere.
Yeah.
I could see wizards.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And nothing else is really jumping out at me. What about you?
The other two that I have is a champion fighter. Or just a fighter in general could work. And divine soul sorcerers.
Sorcerers, yeah.
Divine soul sorcerers would work. So what about backgrounds, Eric?
Probably sage, first of all. Soldier. I need to get a list of backgrounds.
Yeah, pull them up. Yeah. I only use the player's handbook ones. Just so you know, I didn't get into like the weird ones. The other two that I have, other than that, are acolyte and knight.
Yeah, those would be very clear choices for sure.
Or did we say soldier? Soldier too.
Yeah, soldier.
Okay, so that is the Order of the Gauntlet. We've made our way through 3 factions. Do you have any questions so far before we get into the big 2?
So far, these would be considered in the realm of not evil.
Correct. Correct.
If players were going into a place and they had these factions in them, they wouldn't be necessarily worried unless they were an evil party.
Correct.
Right.
I would say so.
All right, let's see these others.
All right, so we get to the big 2, the 4 and the 5. So I'm going to start with, these 2 are my favorite. Like, I couldn't pick between either of them which one is my favorite, but I use them a lot in my campaigns. And I'm going to start with describing the 4th faction, which is the Harpers. Or, as my players like to put it, the least secretive secret organization in Faerûn. So, the Harpers, right? Oh, I'm so excited to talk about the Harpers. So, the Harpers is a secret network of spies and agents that seek to tip the scales in the favor of the innocent, the weak, and the poor of the realms. They pride themselves on being the incorruptible defenders of the greater goods and champions of the oppressed. They seek to thwart tyrants, head off any government, leader, or group that is rumored to have evil intent, to even the odds for the downtrodden.
Oh my god, have you ever heard the phrase, smell your own farts? No offense to the Harpers, but my goodness.
Oh my god. Yeah, seriously. And oh my god. Keep in mind now, this is a secret organization. That's the most important aspect of them, and I don't think I emphasized it enough.
To our listeners, you should, whenever we say secret, imagine big air quotes.
I love that. The Harpers believe that no one entity should wield unchecked power. I do like to think of them sort of like the Rebel Alliance, but but more secretive and more like subterfuge than, the actual Rebel Alliance in Star Wars. But they are like against a centralized tyrant. And they use agents to secretly manipulate events and gather information. They work alone. Agents work alone or in small, discrete groups. And they act in the shadows, employing intelligence gathering, diplomacy, espionage, and strategic interference to shape events without revealing their true influence. We, as a people of Faerûn, have no idea how much the Harpers influence the political landscape around us, because they act in shadow and in secrecy, and even members amongst themselves don't share this kind of information with each other. Members of the Harpers are often extremely diverse, various races, backgrounds, and classes. They highly value individual freedoms, equality, and the idea that every voice deserves to be heard. They could be viewed as revolutionaries and occasionally clash with more lawful factions, because they prioritize the greater good over its strict adherence to the law. So they definitely do shit to break the law all the time in order to further the greater good, in quotes.
Very interesting.
They are one of the most influential and ancient organizations in the Forgotten Realms. They're basically just good guy spies.
Yeah, kind of, I don't know if good guy CIA is really what they want to be compared against, but
It's kind of like that, yeah.
kind of like that.
So the key words that I have for the Harpers are secretive, spies, revolutionaries, and diversity. Their symbol is a silver harp or a gold harp, usually a pin on the inside of a lapel. My pop culture touchstones would be like Robin Hood and the Merry Men, right? Steal from the rich and give to the poor. Chaotic good sort of thing. I also think of Assassin's Creed.
That would be, yeah.
And the IMF from Mission Impossible.
Interesting. So, as a faction, I mean, we've seen them everywhere, right? They've been in basically every mainstream D&D thing lately.
Yes.
But, this might be a bit of a diverging topic, but I've seen people actually saying that the Harpers are almost in a way holding back some of the political structures of Faerûn because they're not, they're kind of, in a sense, keeping the status quo as it is. They're not letting one person really change the power structures that are existing, are they?
No, and that's actually a very good point. They are not without their flaw, and that is a very, very, very true. They have kept the realms in relatively peace for a very long time. And sometimes, I mean, this is a true statement I'm about to say, but like sometimes war is good for the economy and for, politics.
Yeah, I mean, peace is good, but you could also think of it as stagnation. I mean, in the real world, one of the biggest changes of political structure was, the Black Death. And the change away from feudalism was funded by a mass die-off, a cataclysm. But coming out of that, things improved for the common man. Absolutely.
That is a very, very, very good point, Eric. And that's one of the reasons that factions exist in D&D, is to ask these sort of questions, right? And in tabletop games, is to ask these sort of questions and get the party to not just think about, oh, we're just in a dungeon fighting monsters. No, you're impacting the face of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, that is a very, very good way to put it. So as for my examples, I have a list of examples of Harpers. So many of the legendary heroes of the Forgotten Realms were/are harpers. It's said that Elminster himself was a founding member of the Harpers.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, for real. And also many of the Seven Sisters. Are you aware who the Seven Sisters are?
I've heard of the name. I don't know who they are exactly.
They're basically Mistra's children, some of them. They're like chosen of Mistra.
Mm-hmm.
So some examples of the Seven Sisters that are harpers are Larel Silverhand, the Open Lord of Waterdeep. Storm Silverhand and Dove Falconhand are 3 of the 7 sisters. And I think most of them are harpers, but those are the ones I know for sure are harpers. As well as Kelvin Arnson, the Blackstaff, the Blackstaff of Waterdeep. Are you aware of who that is?
No.
Okay, we will talk about the Blackstaff here in a little bit. I do have stuff for him, but Kelvin Arnson, the first Blackstaff, is a harper, or was a harper. Also Artis Cimber, the owner of the Ring of Winter, is a harper, as well as Jaheira from Baldur's Gate 3 and Baldur's Gate 2, I think, or 1.
Yeah, I think 1 and 2.
Yeah, so Jaheira is a harper, as well as Edgin Darvis from the D&D movie, the main character guy from the Honor Among Thieves. He is a harper as well. Mm-hmm. So that's a big long list of harpers, and there's many, many more, but those are the ones that like everybody knows. So we can get into classes. What classes do you think would be harpers?
Criminal, charlatan, kind of those sneaky. Maybe criminal might be a bit, but those.
Sure, for backgrounds, yeah.
Sneaky subterfuge, deception, that kind of stuff for sure.
Absolutely. I have spy and entertainer as
those
well.
Would be good for sure.
Yeah, for backgrounds, yeah. But every background will work. Because, like I said, harpers love their diversity. They have agents everywhere. Mm-hmm. But what about classes? What classes do you think would be
definitely
harpers?
Rogues?
Mm-hmm,
for sure. Rogues would be a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Fighters,
barbarians.
Well, maybe not barbarian because they're a little
loud. Yeah,
they're a little loud. All sorts of warlocks, sorcerers, wizards.
You're missing the big one, Eric. The number one.
The number one?
A bard.
Damn it. Yeah.
A bard would be a perfect harper. But every class
literally
would work.
Called harpers, yeah.
Yes. So every class will work though. You could have a barbarian or a cleric. I mean, Jaheira's a fucking druid and Larel Silverhand's a wizard. Any Dove Falconhand's a ranger. Any class works. It's more about your alignment and your moral sort of compass to determine a harper. Mm-hmm. But okay, that is the harpers. You got any questions?
I have one that's maybe not necessarily about the harpers, but your personal opinions about them.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Since we've seen the harpers in so many of these D&D popular media, and they're in almost all of the modules, and they're in the games, do you think that maybe in the future we're going to start seeing them a little less as the unabashed good guys and, maybe more morally gray, like we talked about?
I will say probably not. The reason being, the harpers are created by Ed Greenwood, the founder, the creator of the Forgotten Realms. And the way that he has written them and run them, it has never been morally gray.
Right. They are a poster child of the Forgotten Realms in a sense.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I don't think that they would be changed in any way as far as or run differently. Just for the simple fact that they are a poster child. They do represent the good in the Forgotten Realms. Even though, like we just discussed, they could be, if you think about it, not so good for the political landscape.
Yeah, which in of itself, they don't have to be grayified, so to say. It's just, with a lot of popular culture, a lot of these superhero movies that have come out in the last 10 years, there has been a trend to make things maybe less unambiguously good or unambiguously bad, if that makes sense.
Right.
But I could definitely see them following along the same path because, it is, at the end of the day, it's high fantasy. And sometimes you need good guys and you need bad guys.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of bad guys, I want to talk about my fucking favorite of the factions. I mean, I got some more later that we'll talk about, minor factions that I really, really love. But one of my favorite to use is the Zhentarim, or the Black Network.
Yes.
I know. I'm so stoked to talk about them. The Zhentarim, or the Black Network, or the Zents, is a pragmatic, ruthless, and unscrupulous shadow network that seeks to expand its influence and power throughout the realms. They are first and foremost a mercenary company and a mercantile organization. However, they walk a fine line when it comes to the letter of the law. They engage in organized crime, economic manipulation, like monopolizing and eliminating competition, and political intrigue to achieve their goals of dominance and influence. While often viewed as nefarious, the Black Network's members view themselves as realists, navigating a world where power is the ultimate currency. So Zhentarim people don't consider themselves evil or bad. They're just like, they're like Slytherin, right? From Harry Potter, right? Slytherin aren't necessarily bad. They're just, it could breed bad people.
Yeah, it's a very individualist kind of system.
Their ultimate goal as the Black Network is to control key trade routes, accumulate allies and resources, and influence the political landscape of the realms. They pursue power for power's sake. So it's not like they have some ultimate goal of like some of the other people where they're like spreading good or whatever. They just want to control everything. They want to have their fingers in every single pie.
When it comes to evil organizations, they're probably one of the less malevolent ones.
I can agree.
Because, you know, they're not trying to release Tiamat or anything. They're not trying to kill everything like the Sharans. They just want money and power.
That's right. And to the Zhentarim, money is power. And they accumulate this wealth by monopolizing mercantilism, like protection rackets, money laundering, extortion, and dealing in contraband. So because they accumulate all this wealth, they're like a wealthy organization. And their members are often the best outfitted and the well-trained for mercenary jobs. If a merchant caravan needs an escort, or a noble needs a bodyguard, or a city needs trained soldiers, that they will hire these Zhentarim because they are the best for the job. And all of those jobs garner connections and favors, which the Black Network highly value. So that's how that money is power thing comes into play, right? If they have all the best trained, members, then they'll get hired for more jobs. And if they get hired for more jobs, they make more connections. If they make more connections, they have more political sway. For a shady group, they take very good care of their members and their allies. Being well-funded, no price is too steep for a city official or a merchant company in their pocket.
Mm-hmm.
So to talk about if you were a member, right? That's their goals. That's what the Zhentarim want. If you're going to talk about being a member, what it's like to be a member. So members consider themselves part of an extended, quote unquote, family, often referring to themselves as the family. This sense of brotherhood holds the network together and binds its members to united purpose. So they feel like they're a family and they get treated like a family. So they do shady shit and they're not worried about too much backstabbing and stuff like that because they are so tight as a family. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a mafia family. In the real world.
Fucking exactly, Eric. But be that as it may, the organization does encourage individual ambition and rewards those who take matters into their own hands for the family. To the Zhentarim, results are all that matters. Those who come into the Black Network with nothing can become major players within the organization through their own hard work and dedication. They prioritize their members to garner power on their own for the family, for the Black Network. So even if one member becomes extremely powerful, like some kind of political mayor or something, it's all for the Zhentarim. It's not necessarily for them.
Mm-hmm.
The Zhentarim is a very old organization that was founded by an evil wizard named Manshoon of Zental Keep, like fucking a long ass time ago. And though it is far from Manshun's original design for the organization still exists, even though Manshun doesn't really. It's hard to explain Manshun. It's a whole thing.
Well, I would say that makes sense because an organization like the Zentarum, how do you squash out the idea of being a family and gaining power? Like, those are the things that would draw in uncountable number of the less fortunate into the ranks. I mean,
right. So like you were saying before, like for the Lord's Alliance, like someone that is sort of downtrodden and doesn't have, an orphan on the streets of a city could go into the Black Network and gain power and money and influence just by having connections in the Black Network.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the Zentarum. Any questions before we move on to the keywords and stuff like that?
I'm just going to say one of my favorite factions. They are awesome to use.
Yeah, and they're perfect for this sort of... I mean, I've used them in every campaign I've ever run. I love having the Zentarum, and even if there's no Harpers, there's always the Zentarum. Oh, we'll talk about that in a second. But I love the Zentarum. I love what they stand for. I think they're a perfect organization if you want to do like a political intrigue campaign. So as far as keywords are concerned, we have ruthless, power, wealth, opportunistic, and pragmatic. Their symbol, which this is important, is a black winged snake. So anytime you see, and a lot of their members have it tattooed on them, so you can always tell when there's a Zentarum member if they have like the black snake tattoo on their neck or on their forearm or so hidden on their chest. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So that's always a fun reveal when, the players are like, meet some really influential guy. And then, you say, oh, and he lifts up to scratch his head and you could see on his forearm the head and wings of a black snake. And they're like, oh, fuck, it's the Zentarum.
I just had a thought, actually. With the Harpers being as sneaky and secretive as they are, it seems like the Zentarum, they kind of toe that line between a spy network and a public-facing mercenary group.
Yes, absolutely. They 100% do. Like, they exist as a organization and a mercenary company. You can go and hire Zentarum members. It's just they also, like, do some really fucking shady shit. Yeah, so for pop culture touchstones, or just touchstones in general, we have, like you said before, the Mafia, or the Mob, is a very, very good example of what the Zentarum is. I mean, the Mafia... I guess the mob, they sort of deal in illicit stuff and money laundering and stuff like that. So they do illegal shit and they buy off cops or whatever to gain political influence to keep their organization running smoothly. So it's not exactly like the mob the mafia really just wants to like take care of themselves or like their family. The Black Network is literally just obsessed with controlling everything. Yeah, they want to like own the trade routes. They want to own everything. So it's a little different than the Mafia or the Mob. But I always think of the Godfather when I think of the Zentarum. You try to play them like the Godfather, and the way that the members of the Mafia or the families in the Godfather treat each other, where they like kiss the dude's ring and stuff, and he always treats them like he's their Godfather. You know what I mean? That they are a family, which is very much how the Zentarum treat their other members.
Absolutely.
So, as far as classes, like player character classes, what classes do you think would be Zentarum?
I mean, the very similar ones to the Harpers, I would say. Sure. Criminal, urchin, entertainer, maybe for like the public facing. Then you have like the fighters and the athletes and the gladiators for fighters.
Oh, sure.
All that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah, criminal for backgrounds. That would be criminal, charlatan, urchin. I would even go noble. Noble would be good. Yeah. But every background could be in the Zentarum. They don't discriminate really. And then what about classes?
Again, a lot like the Harpers. A lot of the sneaky subterfuge for sure. I take like the Zentarum more as like a physical fighter kind of organization.
Okay.
I don't know why. It just seems like they would be more,
they got
boots
thugs
on the ground. Yeah, they got thugs, boots on the ground, getting their hands dirty, scrappy.
Sure. So I have like rogues. But yeah, I have fighters in there as well. You could go barbarian. I could see a barbarian.
For sure.
As well as, because of the nature of the class, I always say warlocks. Warlock would work in
Warlocks would be a good one.
Yeah, for nefarious sort of organization. You could also do a sneaky bard. But again, every class would work as a Zentarum member. Talking about the Harpers and the Zentarum, we now got to talk about the Harpers and the Zentarum, right? So we talked about them individually. Now we need to talk about them together. So the Zentarum and the Harpers are almost diametrically opposed in ideals. The Zents seek to gain dominance and control, and the Harpers seek to thwart tyranny and dominance and control. They are constantly at odds with each other. They have been at odds with the Harpers have been at odds with the Zents since they first became aware of the network's existence. And wherever there is a strong Zentarum presence, there is one or more Harper agents working against them in the shadows to disrupt their plans. Anytime you see a strong Zentarum presence, there is almost always a Harper nearby. Many high-ranking members of the Harpers, including Elminster and several of the Seven Sisters, have sizable bounties on their heads by the Black Network. That's how much the Black Network and the Harpers are against each other.
I love the idea of somebody trying to go out and get a bounty on Elminster of all people.
I swear, I know, that's just so funny. Like, even Manchun couldn't stand up to Elminster. Elminster's like a god at this point. But yeah, so the Harpers and the Zentarum are always clashing against each other. So it's a good resource as a DM. If you're going to introduce the Zentarum, you don't want it to be overtly evil, right? You want the party to sort of discover that the Zentarum are doing nefarious shit. And if they're not getting enough information, or you want them to pursue the Zentarum as a plot point, you would introduce the Harpers and be like, hey, we're the Harpers. We go against what the Zentarum are doing. Here's a quest to help thwart the Zentarum, right?
Right.
So they very easily bounce off of each other as organizations to implement in a D&D setting. So that is the 5 factions, the major factions. The Lord's Alliance, the Emerald Enclave, the Order of the Gauntlet, the Harpers, and the Zentarum. Is there any questions?
So far, so good. I'm learning a shit ton today.
Good. I'm glad. All right, so now we're going to get into the minor factions, and some of these are ones I'm really excited to talk to you about. I'm going to try to. I don't have as many notes on these ones, and no like classes or backgrounds or anything like that. This is just regular. I'm just going to tell you about these factions. So the first faction that I want to talk about is a faction called Force Grey, or the Grey Hands. Have you ever heard of this faction before?
I've heard of the Grey Hands. I don't know exactly what they do, though. Okay,
so it is a Waterdeep specific faction. I wanted to talk about this faction because I know I mentioned the Blackstaff earlier, and I'm about to talk to you about who the Blackstaff is and what that means. The Blackstaff, in quotes, is the title given to the acting Archmage of Waterdeep. So the Archmage of Waterdeep is called the Blackstaff. The Blackstaff, the person, wields a powerful staff called, guess.
The Blackstaff.
The Blackstaff. And they operate out of, guess what the name of the tower is?
Let me guess. It's going to be something fun like the White Tower.
Blackstaff Tower in Waterdeep. So the Blackstaff has a Blackstaff and operates out of Blackstaff Tower in Waterdeep. They are also the headmaster of what academy?
The Blackstaff Academy?
The Blackstaff Academy.
Well, not very creative, are they?
Which is Waterdeep's Wizarding College. So the Blackstaff is a person, a title, and they wield the Blackstaff, which is an ancient and powerful artifact. And they operate out of Blackstaff Tower, and they are the headmaster of Blackstaff Academy, the Wizarding College. Okay, that's who the Blackstaff is. It's just a title, but the name The Blackstaff is a nickname given to Kelvin Arnson, which is the first Blackstaff, because he had the Blackstaff, and they nicknamed him the Blackstaff. And he's the first Archmage of Waterdeep. So and he built the tower, he's the dude. So every other Blackstaff after he died just assumed the title of the Blackstaff. Okay, so now we got to talk about Force Grey. Which is surprisingly not called Blackstaff Hands or something, So Force Grey is a group of elite adventurers who work directly for the Blackstaff, as well as the governmental body of Waterdeep. So it is a sort of small organization that work directly for the Blackstaff, but can also do work for the government of Waterdeep. Their job is to deal with threats to the city that the City Guard and the City Watch are not capable of handling without risking significant loss of life. They are not expected to regularly patrol the city or stand guard. Rather, they respond to emergencies and act as an elite strike force against threats that require a more specialized approach. They also take quests and adventures to further the Blackstaff's goals and research, because the Blackstaff is a wizard. So if he's doing some sort of magical research, he can call upon them to be like, or she, the current Blackstaff is a woman, but to be like, hey, I need something from the Underdark for this potion I'm making. Go get it.
Okay, kind of like SEAL Team 6.
Yes, but yeah, I guess. I'm not sure. Yes. I mean, yes, you're all right. But they also, when they're not on a mission, they can just do whatever they want. So I'm not sure if that's like SEAL Team 6 or not. But they can just do whatever adventure. It's like they're adventurers first and foremost, and then they are Grey Hands secondly. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so that's Force Grey. Any questions? Pretty simple.
Yeah, pretty simple. Straightforward.
Straightforward, yeah. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the Xanathar Guild. Are you aware of the Xanathar Guild? I know you are.
Yes. That was, again, Waterdeep.
Yes, this is also a Waterdeep specific faction, or Skullport specifically. So beneath Waterdeep, I know you know this, but for the audience, beneath Waterdeep is a dark and clandestine underworld known as Skullport. It functions as a subterranean port city, and it's mostly a refuge for all sorts of outcasts and criminals. It's a place where vice, illegal activities, and other less savory aspects of society find a home. Because Waterdeep is so clean and pretty and forward-facing, like we are the nicest city, we're the crown jewel of the North, right? They don't have any a lot of criminal activity on the surface, but Skullport exists to contrast that clean, beautiful, pristine Waterdeep is this ugly criminal underworld right beneath the city. So the Xanathar's Guild is a notorious and powerful thieves guild and criminal organization that operates out of Skullport and in the dark alleyways of Waterdeep. They engage in a wide range of illicit activities such as smuggling, extortion, assassination, theft, counterfeiting, drug trafficking, and illegal gambling. They outright control all of Waterdeep's criminal underworld. If you are doing criminal shit in Waterdeep, you got to go through the Xanathar's Guild. This isn't in my notes, but that also makes them like diametrically opposed to the Zentarum.
Yes, very much the criminal underbelly element.
Yes, and the Zentarum and the Xanathar's Guild war with each other quite frequently, because the Xanathar's Guild does have a stranglehold on criminal activity in Waterdeep. But it's called the Xanathar's Guild because it is named after its enigmatic leader, the Beholder crime lord known as the Xanathar. He's a fucking beholder and a crime boss. They called him like the crime lord of Waterdeep. It's like this is such a like Spider-Man villain.
It is like a cartoon villain, this beholder evil crime lord.
Yes, and so the Xanathar has a reputation. First of all, the Xanathar is a title. There has been dozens of Xanathars over the course of Waterdeep's history, but the current Xanathar, as well as all the other ones, has a reputation for uncaring mercilessness and extreme paranoia. He controls the guild through fear and has no love for any of its members and will petrify or disintegrate any who oppose him, or sometimes just on a whim, because he's a fucking beholder. So anyone that stands in his way or bucks up to him is just, poop, there you go, you're disintegrated, or you're petrified forever. Because he's a beholder, no one really can contest him. He's basically, this beholder crime boss is both an asset and a liability to the integrity of the organization.
Not exactly the most stable of leaders.
No, the opposite. The opposite of that. And there's we could go on a long tangent about who the Xanathar is and what he likes, and also the members of the Xanathar's guild are usually like Underdark dwellers or outcasts. So not necessarily like all humanoids, like say the Zentarum would be. They're like goblins and bugbears and drow and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically the Xanathar guild. Any questions?
No, just that I deeply regret not being able to get into them on my last because they sound really fun.
They are really fun. Something that I really like in Waterdeep Dragon Heist, the Xanathar's guild like has agents above Skullport, and sometimes they're like bugbears that are dressed up like women that push around a carriage with like a goblin in it. Like as a baby, and that's their attempt at like subterfuge, right? Is like a bugbear in a dress pushing around a goblin in a carriage. So I love that for the Xanathar still. They're very goofy. It's deadly, and they're a horrifying thing. You do not want to go up against the Xanathar's guild, but they're also very goofy and silly.
And it's not like, I mean, if you saw a bugbear walking down the street with a goblin in a cart, you're not exactly going to go up and like, hey, you don't belong here.
Exactly. We're going to move on to the next faction. This is one of the ones I'm really excited to talk to you about. This faction is not necessarily specifically on the Sword Coast. So this faction is called the Red Wizards of Thay.
Yes.
Do you know anything about the Red Wizards?
I'm sure I know some surface level stuff. Definitely seen them in the D&D movie.
Uh-huh.
And I know they are absolutely horrible. Horrible. Interesting, but horrible.
That is pretty relevant. Well, let's talk about them so that maybe you can sort of understand a little clearer. So Thay is a country or a nation, and it's to the far east of Faerûn, like way far away from the Sword Coast. Thay is a mysterious and desolate land where magic permeates the very fabric of the region. So it is a very magically potent area. The governmental body of Thay is a magocracy. Do you know what a magocracy is?
I assume it's, the most powerful spellcasters are kind of the ones calling the shots.
Yes, that is correct. It is a style of government where wizards are held in high esteem and are the only citizens allowed to wield governmental authority.
Mm-hmm.
The upper echelon of Thayan society are mages or wizards that belong to a sect known as the Red Wizards. So Red Wizards oversee every aspect of Thayan life, as from the government to like major mercantile organizations and stuff like that. Basically every person of power in Thay is a Red Wizard. Because of their magical connections in this magocracy, Red Wizards can become governors, military leaders, teachers, and even just national heroes. Any magically gifted children in Thay are eagerly sent to apprentice under the Red Wizard. So if you have the gift in Thay, if you're born in lower Thay, like if you're not a mage and you have a kid that has the gift, they will get sent to the Red Wizards to apprentice under them and learn how to be a Red Wizard, and that can bring them up in society. Governing over the Red Wizards. So the Red Wizards have their own governing body. And by extension, all of Thay itself is a council of wizards that are called Zulkir. Each of these 8 members is a master of one of the 8 schools of magic. So the Zulkirs, there's a Zulkir of, evocation, and a Zulkir of enchantment, and a Zulkir of divination, right? They are the leaders of Thay.
Mm-hmm.
However, over 100 years ago, tensions were very high between the 8 Zulkirs, each of which had their own army of loyalists, and they attempted to seize absolute power of Thay. Each of them warred against each other. After a brutal and devastating civil war, the Zulkir of necromancy who is a lich named Zaztam, took sole rulership of Thay. So there used to be 8 Zulkirs that ruled over it equally. But there was this huge civil war, and the guy that came out on top was a lich named Zaztam, who was the Zulkir of necromancy. And now he's the king. He's the ruler, the emperor of Thay. Zaztam is a ruthless and tyrannical ruler. He transformed Thay from a relatively magical and nice and forested place into a realm of hordes of undead and liches and vampires. Basically, every red wizard, if they want to stay in Thay, they have to submit to Zaztam. And not only submit to Zaztam, but become a lich under his control, or a vampire under his control, or you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to still be a red wizard and you still want to live in Thay, you have to become an undead that works for Zaztam. And now the whole land is just filled with undead, and it's just a desolate fucking nightmare hellscape, when it didn't necessarily used to be that way. That's the history of Thay. Now I want to talk about red wizards as a whole. So red wizards are really easy to recognize. They all wear red scholarly robes. So if you see that's why they're called red wizards. So if you see a wizard that has red robes on, probably a red wizard. But they also, another key thing that you would notice on a red wizard is they all have shaved or bald heads, even the women. Mm-hmm. And they are covered in tattoos of stylized arcane symbols. So a bald head with tattoos on their head, and they wear red robes. That's a wizard. That's a red wizard. Each red wizard becomes a red wizard because they are wholly dedicated to a single school of magic. They are forced to forego 2 other schools of magic. So if you want to be a red wizard, you have to pick your specialization, just like you do if you're a regular wizard, right? So let's say evocation is you're a evocation school wizard. You have to forget how to cast the spells of 2 other schools of magic in order to empower your preferred school. So that allows, yeah, I know. And that allows them to prepare more spells per day than an average wizard and cast stronger versions of the spell with lower spell slots. So if you're an evocation wizard, a red wizard, you can forget, let's say divination and enchantment, right? So you can no longer cast a divination spell or an enchantment spell, but you can cast fireball at 2nd level, and it's even stronger, and you can prepare more evocation spells per day than a regular wizard.
I can see why they're a rather notable enemy for spellcasters.
So red wizards pursue arcane might and discovery over all else. With their history of constant violence and aberrant magic, they're basically shunned throughout all of the realms. Dealing with a red wizard usually means working with marauders and conquerors.
Yeah, they're like the Githyanki. They're very self-interested, as I take them. Mm-hmm. They work for themselves. Specifically, they work for the main honcho.
Yes. So that brings up a good point. So because this evil-ass motherfucker, Zaztam, is now ruling Thay, many red wizards have fled the country and gone into hiding rather than descending into lichdom. So instead of becoming a thrall for Zaztam, many of them fled the country. So that's why you may be encountering red wizards on the Sword Coast, because they have fled Zaztam, or they're working for Zaztam, like you just said, furthering Zaztam's goals, their Lich King's goals, or they fled the country and they're furthering their own magical research.
I believe in Baldur's Gate 3, there's a note to a Fae in the, Act 1. In the Blighted Village, there you can find the book, The Necromancy of Thay, in one of those mini dungeons. It's actually a pretty cool Easter egg.
So that guy was a Thayan who fled Thay. That's why, do you remember when you talk to the magic mirror, it's like, if you say you like Zaztam, the mirror doesn't like you?
Yeah.
Because he fled away from Zaztam. So there are a lot of red wizards that don't support Zaztam. Even if they're sinister and evil themselves, these red wizards, they don't want to work for the Lich King. So Zaztam and the red wizards are prominently featured as the primary antagonists of the Dungeons & Dragons movie Honor Among Thieves. I just wanted to add that in there. Zastam is also, you can see him in the movie.
Which is awesome.
Multiple times. Yeah. But see, so in the movie, they portrayed him taking over Thay with the horn thing, right? So you remember that scene where you see the 8 Zulkirs in a circle, and then Zastam lets out this horn thing and it turns everybody into undead, remember?
Mm-hmm.
That was sort of a symbol to show Zastam taking over Thay. Because that kid, the guy, the paladin guy in the D&D movie, he's just a regular dude, but he's a Thayan, right? He's from Thay. He's just not a red wizard. Because there are just people in Thay. There's not all just evil wizards. Okay, so I got 2 more. You ready?
I am ready.
Okay, this is our very special long episode. So the next one I want to talk about is one that you specifically requested. It's the Flaming Fist.
Yes.
Okay, so what do you know about the Flaming Fist?
The broad answer is going to be Baldur's Gate 3. I mean, they're featured so prominently. It seems like it'd be disservice not to talk about them.
The Flaming Fist is a Baldur's Gate specific faction like Force Grey or the Xanathars are Waterdeep specific.
Mm-hmm.
So the Flaming Fist is a large, disciplined, and well-organized mercenary company based in Baldur's Gate. They have been active for over 150 years. The Flaming Fist act as both Baldur's Gate's standing army / military against external forces. So they're like the military, they're the army. But they also act as the city guard, and they like patrol the streets, investigate crimes, and enforce the law. So let's talk about Baldur's Gate real quick. Because in order to talk about the Flaming Fist, you got to talk about Baldur's Gate. So Baldur's Gate is the largest metropolitan city in the Sword Coast. It's bigger than Waterdeep. It's bigger than Neverwinter. It's huge. But it's also called the City of Blood. It's divided into 2 major sections: the lower city and the upper city. The upper city houses the wealthy elite, the nobility, the ruling class. These people are called patriarchs in Baldur's Gate. They're called the patriarchs, the nobles, the ruling class. They're called the patriarchs. The lower city is crowded, poor, and rampant with crime. So the upper city does have its fair share of corruption, but the lower city is where crime is just absolutely rampant. That's why they call it the City of Blood. In my mind, Eric, I always imagine Waterdeep as Metropolis, like Superman, right? And I imagine Baldur's Gate as Gotham, like Batman.
I'd say that's pretty accurate.
Yes, because, Metropolis is like a shining city and nothing really too evil happens there. But Gotham is like rampant with crime and corruption, and Batman's like the only beacon of light in this utter darkness.
Mm-hmm.
The upper city is policed by the gate's actual city guard, because the Baldur's Gate does have an actual city guard. However, the lower city is patrolled by the Flaming Fist. The Flaming Fist do their best to uphold the law, but because of the crime rate in the lower city is so bad, the Flaming Fist have a tendency to be more merciless and quick to violence in the name of quote-unquote justice. They have a very mixed reputation in the realms. Some people appreciate the security and order that the Flaming Fist bring, but others criticize them for using forceful tactics and their strict adherence to the letter of the law. They're known for getting the job done, but usually with a lot of heavy-handed force and military might.
Kind of like an occupation force in your own city.
Yes, exactly like that. So some people accept them, right? Some people love that the Flaming Fist exists, and others are they're occupying. Yeah, exactly. But they've been doing it for fucking 150 years now. You know what I mean? But it is almost certainly an occupation. I'm glad, I never thought of it that way, but that is exactly what it's like. The current marshal or leader of the Flaming Fist is a man named Alder Ravengard,
which we see in game.
Yes, we do. So let's talk about that real quick. So Baldur's Gate is governed by what's called the Council of Four. So the Council of Four are elected leaders that are called dukes. So there's 4 dukes of Baldur's Gate. The leader of the Council of Four is called the Grand Duke. So there's 4 dukes, one of which is the Grand Duke. He settles any voting ties or whatever, right? He's the leader of the Council of Four.
Mm-hmm.
When the last Grand Duke died, Ravengard, older Ravengard, the Marshal of the Flaming Fist, was elected by the people to become the new Grand Duke. So when he accepted the position, he refused to surrender command of the Flaming Fist. So he is now both the Grand Duke of Baldur's Gate and the Marshal of the Flaming Fist, making him basically the most powerful man in Baldur's Gate.
Interesting. I didn't know that. That seems like it'd be almost a red flag.
Yeah, like it doesn't sound too good. I mean, that just further cements the Flaming Fist's position in the city. Because like I said, Baldur's Gate has a city guard. So usually the job of the city guard was to protect the Grand Duke. But now the Grand Duke has the fucking Flaming Fist who also protect him. So when older Ravengard gained power, so did the Flaming Fist. But older Ravengard's a good guy. He doesn't let the power get to his head. From what I understand, he's a very, very noble man. So it's good that he is that way, because that power could definitely get to his head. And also, like, that further explains why, I mean, spoilers for Baldur's Gate 3, I guess. What is the guy's name that ends up being the Grand Duke?
Gortash.
So that's why Gortash, because Ravengard went missing, Gortash became not only the Grand Duke, but also the leader of the Flaming Fist. So he shut down sections of the lower city and stuff so that you couldn't get access to him with the Flaming Fist, because now he controls the Flaming Fist. So they are like two separate entities, now merged into one being the Grand Duke of Baldur's Gate. Okay, that's the Flaming Fist. I got one more that I want to talk about. Last one. You ready?
I am ready.
All right, so this is the last one I want to talk about. It's called the Brigandareth. Are you familiar with what the Brigandareth are?
Ooh, that sounds kind of drowy, but no, I'm not familiar.
It's so drow. 100%. You fucking nailed it. All right, next faction. No, I'm just kidding. So, the Brigandareth are a secretive drow mercenary and intelligence network. And they are led by a male drow, named Jarlaxle Bainray of House Bainray of Menzoberranzan. Do you know what Menzoberranzan is?
Yeah, that's the main drow city.
Main drow city. Yeah, he's a male. Yes, he is a male drow. So that's important to what Brigandareth is. So, due to the cruel and often sexist patriarchal structure of drow society, the Brigandareth acts as a home for outcasts, both male and female, from any drow house. The houses of Menzoberranzan is like a huge thing. Like, there is constant civil wars and political backstabbing in Menzoberranzan between the drow houses. So your last name means a lot in Menzoberranzan. But the Brigandareth are a home to all drow. Like, any drow from any house of any sex can join the Brigandareth. It's a mercenary company first and foremost. And when they first started, they acted as a company for hire in Menzoberranzan to help war against the houses, right? So whatever house approached Jarlaxle and was like, hey, we're going to pay you so much money to join us in this raid against another house, he would just join them, regardless of what family it was. But they have since expanded away from Menzoberranzan, and we'll talk about that in a second. But in order to talk about the Brigandareth, you got to talk about Jarlaxle, right? Jarlaxle Bainray is Brigandareth. It is an extension of him. So Jarlaxle Bainray is an incredibly charismatic and cunning drow, and he serves as the faction's leader. He is known for his wit, skill in combat, and strategic acumen. This guy is so smart, so cunning, and so charismatic. Another fun thing is he has a eye patch that's a magic item that allows him to see invisibility into the ethereal plane, and he has a hat of disguise that he always wears with this huge plumage coming out of it. He's a very ostentatious kind of person.
Nice.
Yeah, I love him. He's really cool. So the members of the Brigandareth are skilled drow warriors, spies, assassins, and arcane casters. So it doesn't really matter what you do. You will be accepted into the Brigandareth and given a position. Jarlaxle uses the faction to not only garner wealth and give a home to those who don't fit into Drow society, but he also uses it to further his own personal ambitions for himself and for his people, his company. He treats the Bragendarth like part of his family. It is a house unto itself, right? Regardless of what house you come from. But they operate primarily in the Underdark, but its influence can be felt in large cities like Luskan and Waterdeep. Luskan specifically. It's believed that Jarlaxle is one of the high captains that rules over Luskan. So Luskan is a port city that is ruled over by, I can't remember how many pirate captains, but it's ruled over by pirates. But they're like political savvy and stuff. It's not like ruthless pirate shit. Like what's the name of the pirate? Tortuga, right? It's not like Tortuga from Pirates of the Caribbean. It's very political and well structured. But it said that like Jarlaxle is one of the high captains. He's just always in disguise. Because I said he's deceptive. He's charismatic. He can disguise himself. Like he could be anyone. So it's said that he's one of the high captains that rules over Luskan, and he wants to gain power in Luskan, and one of his main goals right now is for Luskan to join the Lord's Alliance, to get that sort of protection and stuff that the Lord's Alliance brings.
Interesting.
But yeah, that's it. That's the Bragendarth. That's all my factions that I have. Any questions?
Yes, actually. So I can't remember his last name, but Drizzt, the Drow adventurer,
Duorden.
Drizzt Do'Urden. Is he a member of the Bregandare?
No. So I'm glad you brought this up. So Jarlaxle and Drizzt are like rivals. They came up together. Like Jarlaxle is only marginally older than Drizzt. In the terms of an elf life, they're basically the same age. But yeah, like Drizzt grew up in House Do'Urden in Menzoberranzan, and Jarlaxle is from House Bainray, House Bainray is the main political house of Menzoberranzan. They their matriarch, their matron mother is the matron mother of all the matron mothers in Menzoberranzan. And Jarlaxle and Drizzt have come into conflict many, many, many times over the course of all of the books and series that involve Drizzt's life. Sometimes they work together, and sometimes they're diametrically opposed. They are rivals.
Interesting. I'd have to look
into
this a bit more.
The same guy that wrote Jarlaxle is the same guy that wrote Drizzt.
Yeah. Oh,
so yeah,
awesome. Yeah. Well, that's the only notable Drow I know. But yeah.
Yep. They are like almost like they are spoken about a lot. They've had many adventures together and apart. So I'm just going to give a passing mention to a couple other factions. We have the Arcane Brotherhood is a faction. The Cult of the Dragon is a faction. The Purple Dragon Knights is a faction. The Hell Riders and the Knights of Mithranor. Those are the other factions that I could have talked about, but decided not to.
Yep, that doesn't make them any less important, but
no, definitely not. Especially the Arcane Brotherhood. We just started talking about Luskan, but if I was going to talk about the Arcane Brotherhood, I'd have to talk about Luskan, and if I'm going to talk about the Hell Riders, I'd have to talk about Elturel, the Cult of the Dragon, and Tiamat. There's like a whole bunch of other topics that I would have to discuss in order to discuss these factions. So I think we'll just leave it be with what we have now, and that is factions of the Forgotten Realms.
A little peek behind the curtain onto political intrigue. I think this is an incredible topic, and I really do appreciate you doing a very special episode for this, because this was very awesome.
Of course. I had a great time. Did you learn anything fun? Give me one fun fact that you learned.
Fun fact, the Bragendarth, I didn't know they existed. So I learned, first of all, they exist. Second of all, a Drow secret society. I am going to look into this after we are done for sure.
Oh yeah, they are a thing, and they have a lot of political sway in Luskan. So yeah, anything else?
Fantastic. No, I think I've learned a lot, plenty to chew on, and lots of fantastic information for our listeners.
Okay, so we are going to end this episode with a tip from the Plane Hoppers Guild Handbook. Plane Hoppers Guild Handbook tip number 488. Runic circles can be very good, very bad, or very boring. Unfortunately, it takes a highly knowledgeable person to determine which. If one such person cannot be found, make sure someone else goes first. All right, that was it. Safe travels.
Safe travels, everyone.
Thank you for joining the Plane Hoppers Guild.